What's up, YouTube? I'm here to do my prediction video for UFC 231. Let's start at the bottom. The first fight is Carlos Diego Ferreira versus Kyle Nelson. And to me, Kyle Nelson's pretty solidly well-rounded. He looks like a good striker, wrestler, jiu-jitsu guy, but he's taking this fight on super short notice, and I just think Carlos Ferreira's jiu-jitsu is just way too fucking good in this fight. I think that if Ferreira gets this to the ground at all, I think he's going to submit Nelson. And I think Nelson's taking this fight on way too short a notice. I think that that's going to hurt him in the long run. He's taking this fight on like 3 days' notice. And just because of that, I got to lean towards Ferreira. I say he gets a takedown in the first round and wins by rear naked choke or something like that. Next, we got Chad Laprise versus Diego Lima. And Chad Laprise is a pretty big favorite in this fight. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that, Diego Lima is a natural welterweight, and to me, Chad Laprise is kind of a small welterweight, like big lightweight. I mean, he's definitely the better striker, but to me, Diego's the bigger, longer guy, and I definitely think in the overall grappling sense, Diego's better. Laprise is the better striker, but both these guys have been knocked out quite a few times. They both are capable of being caught at any point in time. I'm leaning towards Laprise. I think his overall wrestling game is better than Diego's. I think he'll keep it on the feet. I'm just saying, I think this fight's much closer than people are giving it credit for. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Diego pulls off the upset, but I'm leaning towards Laprise. I say he wins by either decision or knockout. Next, we got Brad Katone versus Matthew Lopez, and this is essentially two guys that are fairly well-rounded. Matthew Lopez is primarily like a wrestler with some decent striking and decent jiu-jitsu, but Brad Katone is also kind of like this GSP-esque kind of fighter where he has good striking, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu, and his takedowns are more of those like time takedowns. I'm just leaning towards Brad Katone. I think his overall game is just more technical. I think Matthew Lopez is probably the slightly better wrestler, but like I said, I think Katone's striking and overall grappling is just a little bit better. I say he wins a decision. It'll probably be like a 29-28 decision, but I just got Katone like edging out at least 2 of the 3 rounds. Next, we got Devin Clark versus Alexander Reka. And to me, Alexander's just a huge prospect at this point. I don't feel like I've seen any flaw in his game. His striking and wrestling have both been fucking amazing. And that's crazy for a guy from Europe, how good his wrestling is. And he doesn't look like a wrestler. Like, his build is not like this crazy wrestler build. To me, Devin Clark is essentially just a wrestler. I think his striking and jiu-jitsu are mediocre at best. Like I said, he's basically just a wrestler. I don't think he's good enough to just take Alexander down and hold him down. I think that if Alexander just keeps this on the feet and strikes from the outside, he'll eventually knock out Devin Clark. That's what I see happening. I think Alexander gets either a first or second round KO. Next, we got Olivier Aubin-Mercier versus Gilbert Burns. And my opinion of this fight has not changed. I feel like striking-wise, it's probably close. Gilbert hits a little bit harder. But I think the problem is, on the ground, Gilbert Burns is just way better. I think that anywhere in a grappling situation, Gilbert Burns is going to have the advantage. I think it's just going to be like when Olivier fought Carlos Ferreira. He's not going to be able to take the fight anywhere, whether it's on the feet or on the ground. I think he's going to be at a kind of disadvantage. That's just happening. I think this fight hits the ground sooner or later, and when it does, I think Gilbert Burns is going to win by submission. Next, we got Eric Anders versus Elias Theodorou, and to me, Eric Anders has shown that he's not quite as high level as I think everyone thought he was. And I'm not talking about his last fight. I mean, Thiago Santos is a good guy. That could have went either way, but going into it, I did pick Thiago, but like the Tim Williams fight is the fight I'm talking about. Like, Tim Williams is a guy who'd never won the UFC, and he was winning that whole fight, in my opinion. Or, it was 1-1, and then the third round was really close. Eric Anders was probably slightly ahead before he knocked him out, but I'm just saying that fight was way too close against a guy who was way too low level, And to me, Elias Theodorou, I can see him doing the same thing that Tim Williams did, but better. I think Elias's wrestling and over striking game is better than Tim Williams is. I think his conditioning is better too. I think that in terms of like wrestling, Eric is probably the stronger guy, but I think Elias can just keep up with him. His conditioning and his ability to scramble are amazing. And in terms of volume, Elias is going to have the advantage. It's just as long as he doesn't get caught. And I don't think Elias has ever been dropped. So I'm leaning towards Elias. I just think he edges out the rounds and wins a 30-27 decision. Next, we got Katlyn Chookagian versus Jessica Eye. And to me, this is basically just two good strikers going up against each other. It's really close. I don't know. I didn't think Katlyn Chookagian won her last fight. I thought the striking was dead even, but she was moving back the whole fight, and that's That's how fights should be scored when the striking's fucking dead even. That's all I'm saying, is if the significant strikes are dead even and you're the one moving back, you should usually lose, but the scoring system in MMA is retarded. Either way, I'm leaning towards Jessica Eye. I think Jessica Eye's look great since she moved to 125. I think that she keeps the forward pressure, and as long as they score this bastard right, like I said, I think it'll be like the last fight Kathleen had. I think the significant strikes will be about even, but Jessica Eye will be moving forward the whole time and just edge out the fight with that. Next, we got Claudia Gadelha versus Nina Askarov, and this is tough just because Nina's looked so good in her last few, but I still think Claudia's better overall. I think if Claudia can get this to the ground, I don't know if she'll submit her, but I think she can easily control it. Nina's shown she's not the greatest at getting up off of her back. She has decent takedown defense, but it's one of those things where Claudia's conditioning versus Nina's ability to get up. I'm leaning towards Claudia. I think she can win at least 2 of these 3 rounds. And that's what I just think is going to happen. I think Claudia will get Nina to the ground eventually in the first 2 rounds and just do enough to get 10-9s for both of them. And then I think she does enough to survive the third. And I don't think Nina's going to get a 10-8. So I just see Claudia winning this fight 2 rounds to 1, unanimous decision. Next we got Jimmy Manuwa versus Thiago Santos. And this is essentially like a coin flip. It's just whoever lands that big shot first. Both these guys have been knocked out before, and both these guys just swing big shots at each other. Thiago's probably got the better conditioning, so the longer this goes, it definitely favors him. But the way he fights, I don't think it's going to go past like the first round. I think both these guys are going to meet in the middle, and it's just kind of one of those things where whoever lands that big shot first is going to win by KO. And I'm just leaning towards Jimmy. I think he's a little bit bigger and a little bit faster and just hits a little bit harder. I think 205, you know what I mean? Thiago Santos is just a tiny bit too small. And like I said, the way he fights is just going to favor Jimmy. They're going to meet in the middle, and I think that his speed, especially in the first round, is just better. So I got Jimmy Manuwa winning by first round KO. Next is Hakeem Duganwa versus Kyle Bochniak, and this all depends on if Kyle can get into that closed boxing range, because Hakeem is the much better striker from the outside. I think that the way he mixes it up is just too good. I feel like if Kyle can just keep that forward pressure on him and make him back up, then he could eventually land that big shot. It's really tough just because it's hard to tell where both these guys are at, because they both look decent in some fights and bad in others. I'm leaning towards Hakeem. I think that he'll be able to keep it on the outside, but like I said, this fight's really close. I could easily see Kyle eventually walking him down and landing a big punch, but that's really what it is. It's who can keep that distance. If Hakeem can stay on the outside, I think he wins, and if Kyle can force it into boxing range, I think he'll win. But I'm leaning towards Hakeem to win by decision. Next, we got Alex Oliveira versus Gunnar Nelson, and this is kind of like the Jimmy Manuwa fight. I think early on, Alex Oliveira's got the big advantage. Later in the fight, Gunnar Nelson's got the big advantage. I definitely think overall on the ground, Gunnar's got the advantage, but to be fair, Alex Oliveira survived 2.5 rounds with Gilbert Burns, and you know what I mean? His takedown defense is pretty solid, and him on the ground isn't horrible. He has decent submission defense. My biggest fear is that Gunnar's just been out for so long, and Alex Oliveira's been consistently fighting, and I think that's going to help him. I think, as long as Alex Oliveira keeps it tight, I think he'll be okay. He does tend to swing wild, and that could hurt him later, but I'm just going to hope that he keeps it compact, and the time off is going to hurt Nelson, so I'm going to lean towards Alex Oliveira winning by round 1 KO. Next, we got Valentina Shevchenko versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and I like these two chicks about the same. I like Joanna maybe a tiny bit more, but we all know what this fight's going to be. It's going to be a kickboxing match, or Valentina will get this to the ground and win by submission. And Valentina's already beaten Joanna a bunch of times at kickboxing, so I just don't see Joanna winning this. I think that, like I said, Valentina's just shown that she's the better kickboxer at this point. She's the naturally bigger chick, and like I said, she's the naturally better grappler. So I'm leaning towards Valentina. I say she wins probably at least 3, maybe 4 out of the 5 rounds and wins by decision. Next, we got Max Holloway versus Brian Ortega, and I don't know why people are counting out Max Holloway so much. I feel like he's the better striker, and Brian Ortega, despite the fact that he's undefeated, a lot of the fights that he's won, other than that Frankie Edgar fight, were fights that he was losing and then came back. I don't think he's going to get lucky like that against Max Holloway. I think that this fight's going to be on the feet. I don't think he's good enough to take Max Holloway to the ground, and I think Max Holloway's jiu-jitsu is decent enough to survive there. And like I said, I think this is a striking fight for as long as it lasts. It could go the distance, but I don't know. I do think Max will eventually light him up and just win by TKO. Yeah, I mean, Brian Ortega's definitely got better at the striking, but I just think Max has got the advantage there, and I don't think Brian, like I said, Brian's wrestling is good enough to get this to the ground. So I got Max winning at least 3 out of the 5 rounds, and maybe even winning by like 4th round knockout. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe.